John, can you just start us off by talking about how you came to know Mr. Dershowitz and how you came to make this up?
Is this one working? Okay. Actually, I did a short profile on Alan beginning in 2013, so 10 years ago. I met him in Miami when he was in a hurry to get back to New York, but I think that was a 30-minute interview, and later filmed with him on the Vineyard, and I think maybe once in New York. And that was just a 6 or 7 minute profile. And I thought, I was very surprised no one in America had done this topic. It seemed to be an amazing life, and I signed on in 2018. Actually, that scene at Colgate University where the students are protesting, turning their back, I just drove down from Montreal to Colgate to ask Alan if he would be in the film, and I actually brought my little camera down with me, and there was the first scene, and it only got worse or better from there.
Well, my only major disappointment is that the film ends as if my career is over. And after what's happened in the Middle East, the last 35 days, I have devoted to writing a whole book called War Against the Jews, How to End Hamas Barbarism, and I've basically just had a whole new career based on that. So I hope maybe you can edit the film and add a few more things and make it a work in progress, because I'm not expecting to retire anytime soon. But thank all of you, particularly those of you, Harvey and Nadine, Carolyn, Elon, who are in the film, and thank you so much for surprising me. I had no idea what you would be saying. I actually, I never talked to you about things like this, so I didn't really know what you thought of me in some ways, and I appreciate the nuance and the complexity. I love nuance, and one of my favorite stories has always been about Harry Truman, who asked his Attorney General to appoint a lawyer for him that had been in an accident and had lost one of his arms. And the Attorney General said, well, that's so wonderful of you, you want to help the handicapped. He said, no, I'm just sick and tired of those lawyers who tell me on the one hand and on the other hand. I want a one-handed lawyer. And I always tell my clients, I'm not a one-handed lawyer. I'm always going to give you on the one hand, on the other hand. And I think the movie reflects that part of me.
How do you toe the line, this insistence on role morality? I mean, is there somebody that you absolutely would not represent?
I have rules. This is a better one. I think this is better. I have lots of rules. And I'll tell you a case. So I was called by a man named Radovan Karadzic. He was the butcher of Bosnia, and he was hiding away. He was accused of genocide. And he called me from his hideout somewhere, and he said, will you represent me? And I said, no, I have several rules. One, I will never represent a fugitive. I believe in the justice system, and I'm not going to help you escape justice. Number two, I never represent somebody who's engaged in continuing criminal activity. Now you might say, what about Trump? We'll talk about that in a minute. But, so I said no. And I said, and if you do surrender to The Hague, I'll then talk to you. A few months later, he was caught, and he ended up in The Hague, and he asked me if I would come and see him. And I went and I saw him, and I said, but the criminal actions that are taking place are continuing. I can't represent you unless you can stop them. And he said, I have no authority, I can't stop them. And so I didn't represent him because I don't represent continuing criminals and I don't represent fugitives, but I would represent anybody unless there was a conflict of interest, no matter what crime they are accused of. Now you can ask me the obvious question that many of you are asking now. Would I represent the people of Hamas who went into Israel and beheaded and raped and murdered and burned people, and in that case I couldn't do that because I know some of the people. I know some of the victims. I'm a friend of a general who lost 5 people, and 3 of them killed and 2 of them being held hostage. So there are limits, but they're not the obvious ones that you would think of. Role morality, everybody has role morality. Can you imagine somebody being told, I'm about to go and beat my wife to a pulp, and that person doesn't call the police? Well, there's a name for that person. He's called a Catholic priest. If you go into confession and you tell a Catholic priest, I'm about to go and beat my wife, the priest can tell you you're going to hell, you're going to damnation, you're going to be burning, etc., but he can't drop a dime on you. A lawyer can. Lawyers have different role morality. A psychiatrist can, but a priest can't. My daughter-in-law is an emergency room doctor at a major hospital. And she can't refuse to, it was in the film, deal with a person who might go out and commit more crimes. So there is such a thing as absolute morality, but in a democracy where different people play different roles, there's role morality. People give me the answer all the time. Oh, in other words, you think that the concentration camp guard in Auschwitz was... No. That system was a terrible system that doesn't deserve role morality, but we have a great system, a wonderful system, and the role of the lawyer is a very important one. And so I do completely support the role morality that I have to play, but let me tell you, it's very difficult to represent people who are terrible, terrible, terrible people. But if I can't do it, the reason I have to do it is I was a professor with tenure. And if I say I won't do it, I had no fear of losing my job. How could I teach my students that they had to do it?
On a smaller level, we here at Doc NYC have our own role morality. So we show films that we're not on sides,
right.
We're not on side of any issues, but we show good films. And John has made a really excellent film.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to talk to you. I wanted to ask you, it is, there are elements of this film that are like a true crime, something you would see on TV. You have the drone shots, you have the dramatic music, but yet you've done a really fine job of navigating lines of morality and neutrality. Can you just talk about your process?
Well, actually, unfortunately, the guy who helped me do this, Paul Carvalho, was an Eman fellow at Harvard, and actually met Alan for a short period, 20 years ago, long before I met. He had died just a couple of months ago, so it's through talking with Paul and him critiquing the edit, and we both became incredibly familiar with Alan's life and discussed this ad nauseum for 5 years. So it's a tricky story to tell. Actually, I think Dryden said about I think the English poet Dryden said about Chaucer that here is God's plenty. Well, Alan's career has just got way too much in it, even for a long film like this, and trying to pull out a few of the key events and trials in his life was very difficult. We had a lot of discussion, and then on top of that, his most difficult client, he calls, is Israel. So how do you fit that into the mix? It was really actually very tough. The only thing I was sad I couldn't put in, but I just couldn't fit it in. Alan's actually written an opera about the Holocaust, and a great Jewish cantor came and sang for us, but we just couldn't fit it in the film, which is really too bad.
I have one question for you. As I said, I hadn't seen the film. And what surprised me was the fact that it's not chronological, that it goes from episode to episode, some goes back, it goes forward. What was your theory of how to create the narrative non-chronologically?
It really wasn't a theory. And initially, you had a lot of your youth, and traditionally, you start in the middle of the action, then you do the whole, you know, young to, well, let's say, baby to 21. You get that all by, but there was just too much to put in. It would have been 10 minutes long, so we decided to kind of chop it up and, you know, do a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think it didn't disturb the sort of progress or the good.
Would you, Mr. Dershowitz, consider, or have you been asked to represent Donald Trump in any of his most recent accusations?
I have another rule. You get me once. I don't want to become consigliere to a family, and so, you know, pick your time carefully, and because I'm only going to represent you once. And, you know, there was a little bit of misleading by this guy called Painter, this professor, who made it sound like I was responsible for him challenging the election and doing all the terrible things he did on January 6th, which I fundamentally disagree with. But then, of course, you then have me saying correctly that I would have nothing to do. He asked me to do his second case, and I can tell you I've been asked to do some of the current cases, and my answer, first of all, I love my wife, and I want to continue to have her sleep with me. And I just know that if I represented Donald Trump, again, fortunately I have a rule, and the rule permits me to, on principle, say no, but I'm very happy for that rule because I really love sleeping with my wife.
I'm going to open it up to the audience for any questions. Right behind your wife.
Two.
Two questions, please. Firstly, regarding the
Louder, please.
regarding the settlement you ultimately have with Virginia Dufresne, someone who made your life so miserable overseas, you say you spent $5 million.
That's right.
Why would you ultimately agree to just a statement saying I may have made a mistake rather than a real full-out mea culpa?
Part of the, first of all, it wasn't a settlement. I gave nothing. It was simply an agreement on her part to drop the charges, all allegations, all accusations against me, and to make that statement. And that's, you'd have to ask others. I'm precluded from talking about this. I can only say that a person who totally admits, I'm doing this hypothetically admits that she made up a story completely, is open up to some problems. And she said what she said, and it's enough for me. People have to believe what they have to believe. The evidence, as the statement says right from the beginning, I have categorically denied and disproved it, and I could just repeat here what I've said over and over and over again. Never met her, never heard of her, never had any contact with her. I've never had any, one problem is they picked on the wrong person. You can pick on Prince Andrew, that's easy, he's Randy Andy. But I've never done anything like this in my life, period. I love my wife, and I'm totally committed to her. And so, the case is resolved the way it was resolved. As I say, it cost me a fortune of money to do this, but in the end, I had no choice. I had to make sure the truth came out.
Just one more question. You said that you didn't want to take Trump's second impeachment because you didn't want to anywhere be associated with
That's right.
the election was stolen. But you're going to be associated with, murder and rape and all that. How do you square that?
Oh, because those are things that are in the past, and the government has the burden of proving it. But if I were to defend Donald Trump on allegations regarding the election, I'd have to put my own self or imprimatur on the issue. I don't think he would have wanted me to represent him saying, I think the election was fair, I think that Biden was the legitimately elected president, but, I just didn't think that would be a fit. With murders, you don't have to, the government has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. the O.J. Simpson case, there was a mountain of evidence, an absolute mountain of evidence. The problem is, at least some of it was fake. And by being able to prove that the sock had been tampered with, jurors told us afterward that once we proved, and everybody in the jury believed this, once we proved that one piece of evidence had been tampered with deliberately by the government, every other piece of evidence became subject to doubt. And that's why we didn't win the O.J. Simpson case. The police and the prosecution lost it.
Alan, how much do you think that you're being born and raised in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn influenced your attitudes and your whole career?
Well, this is Harvey Silverglade, who is, okay.
The question was, how much, if you're being born in Williamsburg, do you think influenced your career?
Born and raised.
Born and raised.
Born and raised. Now, you have to understand who the questioner is. So the questioner is Harvey Silverglade, probably one of the greatest contemporary lawyers of the last half century, somebody I've been privileged to litigate cases with over the years. We started when I was asked to defend a young person who had planted a bomb, Sheldon Siegel, and I didn't know anything about how to get him to a courthouse, and so I asked my former student, Harvey, if he could show me the courthouse, and together we won the case, and we've won lots and lots of cases since. You have to understand the essence of his question is because he grew up in Bensonhurst, and he is not so sure that the Bensonhurst part of growing up was an advantage or a disadvantage over Williamsburg and Borough Park. But to take the question seriously, growing up the way I did had everything to do with my life and my career. I grew up a skeptic. I doubted everything and doubted everybody. I'm a skeptic about everything. I'm a skeptic about religion. I'm a skeptic about non-religion. I'm a skeptic about science. I'm a skeptic about politics. And Brooklyn was a place of skepticism. I think Brooklyn gave me a number of things. My skepticism, a sense of humor, because if you wanted to be successful in Brooklyn, you had to be funny. And so I've often asked the question, how many successful people grew up in Brooklyn? And it's remarkable. And so I thank the Lord that I was born in Williamsburg, moved to Borough Park at a relatively early age, and stayed there, you know, through college. And Brooklyn College really made me everything I was, and I owe them everything, but I won't contribute a penny to them because they turned into a bastion of anti-Semitism. They will not allow me to speak at the political science department. I'm probably their most well-known graduate of Brooklyn College's political science department. The students wanted me to speak there. The department said no. We've already heard from Norman Finkelstein on Israel. Norman Finkelstein is a very anti-Israel person. We don't have to hear from you. So no more money to Brooklyn College, no money to Yale Law School, no money to Harvard. Nobody's getting a single penny from me or any support from me until they have a reckoning. The kind of reckoning that resulted after the George Floyd killing has to occur in colleges. They have to reckon with their long history of anti-Semitism, the fact that Harvard in the 1930s welcomed Nazis, sent people to go to Nazi universities that had just fired all of their professors, quota systems, etc. And now what's going on with 33 student groups. The day after these massacres and rapes and beheadings, 33 student groups issued a statement saying Israel was completely responsible for all of these rapes and murders. And to this day, the president of Harvard has refused to condemn those students. And until she does, do not count on my support.
Alan, a question just about his shunning and whether he thinks he will get over it. Are you going to be, Temple Emmanuel has not had you as a speaker, the 92nd Street Y has not had you as a speaker. Are they going to let you back in?
I don't think so. You'd think the 92nd Street Y would want me to talk about my book, War Against the Jews. It's the most obvious thing. But they won't. They won't let me come back. 92nd Street Y, Temple Emmanuel. And by the way, those were not Trump cancellations. Those were all cancellations based on the accusation against me, which the woman has now admitted. You know, she may have mistaken me for somebody else. You'd think these institutions would reconsider, but they have so much egotism and so much arrogance that they're unwilling to reconsider.
I am afraid we're out of time. We have another screening, so perhaps Alan will continue this conversation with you in the hall.
I'd love to do it, and thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoyed it.